today we're going to put down some cactus seeds, and for a change we're going to germinate them in a different way. I'm going to put them down on some wet paper towel just to see how long they take before they actually germinate. Seeds we're using today are Trichocereus. They're the ones we're going to put down. Because this is a test, I'll actually be putting down about five or six mainly, and there are the seeds. We'll take them out of the pack in a moment, but we've got some stuff to do before we get to that stage. The first thing we'll do is I'll moisten the paper towel, and you'll notice I've got written on here H2O plus 1/8. That means it's water with 1/8 strength seaweed fertilizer in it. Not particularly for the seedlings to give them a little bit of a boost through the fertilizer, but because there are good bacteria in that solution and I want to add them to our project. Alright, so we've wet the paper towel. Next thing we'll do is we're going to put a little bit of cinnamon on it, which is a natural fungicide, and that'll keep any fungus at bay. I'll just sprinkle it very lightly around over the top of the wet paper. Put the rest in there, we don't want it. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get some seeds out of this little packet. I'm going to place them with a set of tweezers that I'll get now. I'm going to place the seeds individually with a pair of tweezers, and I'm going to also place the seeds relatively spaciously apart, because when the seeds germinate and the first root goes down, which is called a radicle, there's the first seed, the radicle starts to grow into the paper, and it can damage the initial hair follicles on the radicle, third one, and another couple. If you just lift them up from the paper, I'll put another one down, we'll make it half a dozen even. Do up the rest of the packet so we don't lose them. I'll actually be planting the rest of those in the normal way, I would think. This is just a test to see whether this method works for me or not. Alright, so there's our seeds set up on the wet paper. Alright, next thing we'll do is we'll double up the paper, tap it down lightly, and give it another spray with our water plus. These are some seeds of Trichocereus Peruvianus I put down a little while ago, about 8 days ago. An experiment to see how they grow on wet paper towel, and I've actually got 2 of them have germinated so far. They're pretty hard to see. There's the first one there, and oh no, I've actually got 3. One there, there's one there, and another one there. So I put down 6 seeds. So we've got 3 of them so far, and I think there's a little bit of mold on that seed there, that one. I think that may be a new one there. I'll look at that tomorrow and see. Those 2 there seem to have little signs of life in them. But I put cinnamon on this, that's a brown stain on there to hold the fungus. So we'll have to wait until I finish the experiment to see whether it's going to work. But in the meantime, I'll put that cover back on again, and I'll put that on its heat mat. In the meantime, I've got some of this, some wettable sulfur, that quite a few people seem to say is very good for controlling fungus and mildew and rust, etc. So I'm going to try that on the next batch I'm going to do on a couple of cotton wool makeup pads. Yeah, so that's not too bad. If we've got 3 of those coming out, they'll have to be transferred pretty soon, but they're still micro tiny. Alright, I'll take a photo of those and then I'll put them back on the heat mat. These are the tricho seeds I put down in some paper toweling to see how they germinate, and they're not doing too badly actually. There's a little one there you can see, there's another little one over there, and the best one is this one here. That is doing very well. So in actual fact, I'm going to have to take that out and pot it up, because if you leave the seedlings too long here, the roots grow down into the wet paper towel, and it's very hard to remove the seedlings without tearing all the hair follicles off on the radicle, and that is not a good idea. I'll turn this round and you'll be able to see there's another one just there behind that really big one. There's another one there. That's the other one I showed you there. And over here is one there. There's one there, a little guy just starting off. But that's 5 out of the 6 I put down, so that's not a bad germination rate in actual fact. All right, I'll close that up, put that back, and tomorrow that guy there will be potted up. He needs to be removed. Today we're going to transplant one of the little seedlings in here that I germinated in this piece of paper towel. That's the name of the plant. So what I've got to do first up is I've got to make a potting mix to put it in. Because seedlings are so small, I'm going to make up a special batch of media to put the seedling in. And I'm using some very fine beach stand in it. No salt at all in the sand, but it's very fine, way finer than the usual mix that I make to put my cactus in, but this is so tiny, we're going to start off with a very light mix. And I'll just mix that round until it gets relatively well homogenized and mixed in, and then we can get on with the next step. I'm going to put the seedling into a 2-inch pot. So initially I'll pretty much fill the pot up, tap it down a little bit more in, because this seedling is going to take up exactly no room in there. Right, that's our pot of media that's ready. So to save destroying those tiny little root hairs, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of the paper toweling off, being very careful not to hurt our seedlings. It's not very easy to do on a piece of wet tissue paper, but we're getting there. I don't want to hurt the other one behind it either, but that is not quite it. Getting close though. I'll cut that little corner off there. Scissors could be a little bit tighter, I would think. And that's our little seedling we're going to transplant. I'll put that aside for the moment. And I'll put the rest of the paper towel, I'll wet that, and I'll put it back into the plastic bag, and we'll let that grow on a little bit longer. Right, the paper towel with the rest of the seedlings back in the plastic bag on the heat mat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm very carefully going to cut a square around this tiny little seedling here. Yeah, wet tissue paper doesn't cut very well, we know that. Alright, so a pair of forceps to hold it, and that's our little seedling there. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'll put that on the side of the pot for the moment, and I'll make a little bit of a dent in here with the forceps, and then I'll place the seedling and the little bit of paper it's attached to just under the surface, and cover very, very carefully, cover the top of the paper with our potting mix, staying clear of the plant. Now, some people say you shouldn't water a seedling this small when you transplant it. I don't actually agree with that. I know that the little seedling is in shock, but it doesn't need the shock of being totally bone dry because it's lived in a very wet environment. So those 2 tiny little squirts are all I'm going to give it, and you can just see the tiny little seedling down there. I'll put a label in it, and now it's going back onto the heat mat where it's spent the last about 3 weeks. So I think it's about 3 weeks ago they were planted. So that's where it's going back now. And there's our freshly potted up little plant. You can hardly see it down in there. I'll pull that in a bit closer when I'm editing the video. There's the name behind it, and it's now going to go over there, get a little bit of extra light on from my LED system here. This is only a temporary setup because I'm currently building a 6,700 degrees Kelvin lighting setup to germinate all my cactus seeds in next year, well, September, October this year. But this is what I've got for the moment. Down here, this guy here that's got roots on it already. Put him down there, and this guy here has got roots, or a singular root coming at him, so we'll put him down there. Oh, that guy down there's got roots on him too. Right, we'll take that one off.